Okay, so this week we're working on our ED ending sounds, okay? All of the words that we're working on this week have the ED as the suffix. Who remembers what a suffix is? Who remembers what a suffix is? You guys? No one remembers? All right, so here you have a suffix. This is the ending of a word. So if I have the word helped, this ED is your suffix. It comes at the end of the root word. What's the main word or the base word, the root word in helped? What word do you see in there, Jordan? ED is the suffix. What word do you see in there, Alicia? Help. So help is your root word or your base word, and then you have ED. That is your suffix. So we are going to be working all with words that have the ED ending or the suffix ED. This ED can make 3 separate sounds. Okay? The first sound that the ED can make is the id, as in wanted, needed. You hear the ending, it makes the id sound. The second ending it can make is the T. Helped, looked, washed. That's different from wanted, needed. You see, it's the same ending, different sounds. The last, you want to close the door? Go ahead. The last sound it can make is the D sound, the D. Called, cleaned, offered. So the ED ending has 3 separate sounds. You have the id, wanted, needed. You have the T, helped, looked, washed. And you also have the D sound, that D. Called, cleaned, offered. Okay? So we're going to watch a video on it, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper.
Hey everyone, welcome to elementalenglish.com. Today's lesson is slow practice of the ED ending in English. T, D, or id. An English pronunciation lesson. This lesson is part of the series on the ED ending. You can also see a quick overview or an in-depth lesson on the ED ending. As previous lessons have already discussed, the ED ending in English has 3 sounds, t, d, or id. This change in sound results from whether or not the vocal cords vibrate to create the sound right before the ED ending. For example, when we say kissed, because there is no vibration in the vocal cords, it's voiceless when we say the s consonant sound. It's simply efficient for your vocal cords to continue to not vibrate and pronounce the ED ending as a voiceless t, kissed.
So why don't you give it a try? So if you say the word kissed, go ahead, say it and hold your vocal cord. It should not vibrate. Kissed. It vibrates when you do that, right? But there's no vibration there. So it's very natural for your voice just to continue it. Kissed. Okay? When there's a vibration, it changes.
Similarly, when we say buzzed, because the vocal cords vibrate, they're voiced, when we say the z consonant sound, the ED ending will naturally continue to vibrate and sound like a d. Buzzed.
Try it. Buzzed. You feel the difference in your throat? So if you do first, hold your throat and say kissed. Now say buzzed. You're saying no because you're not doing it. Buzzed. You feel the vibration. It's just one way to look at it. Other ways, you just think about it has 3 separate sounds. They all have an ED ending. Some make the T, some make the D sound, and some make the it.
Buzzed. When there's a t or a d before the ED ending, that ED ending will be pronounced as an id. Got it? Let's practice saying the past tense of verbs nice and slowly so that you can hear and master.
Before we move forward, remember how last week, who remembers what we were working on last week? You guys were working on it with Miss Villarosa. Remember your skill last week? No. We were talking about verb endings, right? How you had adjectives, and they were describing, and we were talking about er and est, right? Blue, bluer, bluest. My friends, if you don't remember, we're going to go back and do it again. Nobody remembers that at all from last week? Because I don't want to move forward unless you're not in trouble. I just don't want to move forward unless let's go back and review. Okay? Okay, my friends at home, you're coming with us. Here we go. Classwork from last week. We're going to go down to word work. Remember, we were talking about the ER and the EST. So that is when you're comparing something. So remember, you had, all of these are adjectives, right? Hot, blue, lucky. Those are all describing words. When you change the suffix, you're changing the tense. Here is where you were comparing. So we have blue, bluer, bluest. We were changing the endings of the words, comparing it. Hot, hotter, hottest. Remember from last week? Yes? Okay. So now let's go back to this week. Here is where you are changing the endings. Okay? I think I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So tomorrow I'm specifically going to talk about the past tense. Does anybody know what the past tense is? When you're talking about the past, it means it already happened. Okay? So we're not talking about the future or the present. We're talking about the past. So yesterday, my son helped me do the dishes. If he was doing it right now, I would say he's helping me do the dishes. Okay? If it's in the future, I would say he will help. All of these ed endings mean it happens in the past. But I'm going to dig a little bit deeper on that tomorrow. Okay, today we're just going to focus on recognizing it has 3 separate sounds. The ed ending has 3 separate sounds. So if I look here, okay, the past tense ed, when you add ed to a word, it tells that the action already happened. So I wouldn't say it's raining, because that would be present, happening right now. It rained yesterday with the ed ending. What sound do you hear at the end of rained? What sound do you hear at the end of rained? Do you hear the id, the d, or the t sound? Christelle? You hear the d, right? Rained. It still has the ed ending. It just makes the d sound, not d. If you have, all of these have ed endings. The id is that voiced sound. If I have wanted, needed, they all make the id sound. Can anybody think of a word that also has the ed ending that makes the id sound? That has the id sound at the end. Yeah, Jordan. I'm sorry? You say it a little bit louder? Wind. Wind. Here. W-I-N-D. Does it have an ed ending? Does that show us it's in the past? Nope. So this doesn't count. It has to have an ed ending, but it does make the d sound at the end, but we're specifically focusing on the ed endings. Yes. Kid. Same thing. Kid. There's no ed ending. It's just K-I-D. Yes, it makes the d sound at the end, but I'm looking for an ed ended, like want it, need it. Ariel? I'm sorry? You know, I'm over the fan and the mask. What were you saying?
Biggest.
Biggest. That's what we were working on last week, comparing, right? Bigger, biggest. That's EST. Big-est. Does that have an ER ending? ED ending? Nope. So that one doesn't count. Yes? I'm sorry? She said cutted. Now, a lot of us say that. I cutted the paper, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not proper English, so it doesn't count. It's called slang. It's the way you speak. It's not cutted. It's just I cut the paper. There's no past tense of cut. But it happens a lot because we speak that way. So sometimes we get confused between what sounds right and what is right. Yes. I'm sorry? Most wanted. Yes, wanted. Here we go. Wanted. I'm going to move. You have something for ED? Go ahead.
Heated.
Heated. Very good. Like I heated up my soup. This has the ED ending. Heated. But you hear the id sound. Good job. Yes. Cooked. Cooked. Does that have the ED ending? What sound does it have? The T. So we could put it on our T column. Cooked. This ED ending makes the T sound. Good. Does anybody else have one for the T? We have helped, cooked, looked, washed, laughed. Want to move on to the D? We have a bunch here. Go ahead. Let's do the D. ED is not a word. That's only a suffix. It's a word if you attach it to a root word or a base word, but we can't just write ED. If we have the D, called, rained, cleaned, offered. Yes? I'm sorry? V? Feed. F-E-E-D. Feed. Does it have an ED ending?
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying that this is the ED ending. So now let's look at the base word or the root word. Is F-E, is fee a word?
No.
Unless it was F-E-E, like you pay a fee, but F-E is not a word. So fee, this is where you have the double E, that's a different rule. Okay, so that one doesn't follow our ED endings, but I see what you're saying now. So today we're just introducing the skill. What you're going to do is, today, on your slides, I'm not going to make you write them in your notebook today because you have an extra assignment on there from me. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the columns here. Here you have the words at the bottom. Needed, finished, looked. You're going to take these words at the bottom and you're going to sort them by the sound. So let's try one together. If I have the word needed, needed, what sound do you hear? Do you hear the ED or the ID, the id? Do you hear the t or do you hear the d? Elon. The id, very good. So sometimes I write it as ED or ID. I'm going to click right here and I'm going to put needed. I can make it smaller too if it bothers you, because you know it bothers me when it's not. But it might not bother you, it's fine. Okay? So I'm going to sort the words into the column by the sound that I hear at the end. That's all I'm doing today. Tomorrow we're going to dig a little bit deeper, talking about what the past tense really means and trying to focus a little bit more on these endings. Questions on what you're doing for word work today? Okay. So on your Google Classroom, what you're doing, it's a little different today. Okay? I am testing your reading levels, so I'm not pulling guided reading. So you're going to do what you normally would do in your centers. Close reading, you're going to have your reading skill. We're doing the same skill as we focused on last week. So we're opening up the point of view slides. Did I record it? Yes, I recorded it for you. So you can listen to it, listen to the lesson. You're going to read I Want a Rabbit. I did read it to you if you're struggling to read it on your own. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to talk about what is the author's point of view about the topic. Remind me what a point of view is. or the author's perspective from last week, remember? You did it with Miss Villarosa. Go ahead, Jazir. Very good. It's the author's opinion. It's how the author feels about something. So I'm looking at the title, I want a rabbit. I can automatically assume what's the author's opinion on a rabbit. You think the author enjoys, wants, likes rabbits, or hates rabbits? Likes rabbits, right? I want a rabbit. If you want something, it means you like it. I wouldn't want a tarantula in my house. That's not something I would want, right? Because that would creep me out. But this author, so I wouldn't write something of I want a tarantula. I would write something as I do not want a tarantula, right? So what you're going to do is you are going to read I want a rabbit. I'll wait for you to be ready. Come up with how the author feels about the topic and what are some reasons for it, just like you practiced last week. Then you're going to do your regular things, okay? I'll post your word work on there. Monday's close reading. And I think I'm going to start your vocabulary tomorrow. Okay? Any questions? I'll put your to-do list up on the board. Any questions on that? Today you're just practicing your ED endings. I don't expect it to be perfect. I just want you to start to look at it. Okay.